Is there evidence of voter fraud? I was given 5 claims to look through, and this video is about the first one. 4 campaign workers charged after allegedly misusing absentee ballots in 2019 Bridgeport, Connecticut. We got Nilsa Heredia, Wanda Gina Pataki, Alfredo Castillo,
and Josephine Edmonds. Charges include unlawful possession of absentee ballots, witness tampering, misrepresenting absentee ballot eligibility requirements, and failure to maintain a ballot distribution list.
Before I get into if this case is voter fraud, I first want to go over what voter fraud is. People typically see voter fraud as rigging an election to make sure a specific candidate wins. People typically don't see voter fraud as just breaking a technical rule. For example, it's illegal to take pictures inside of a polling place, but most people wouldn't see that as an example of voter fraud. With that being said, after reviewing this case, I see this as more of an example as breaking a technical rule than actually trying to rig an election for a specific candidate. So now let's go through the evidence that convinced me of this. First, a couple things to keep in mind. So far, only one of the 4 people have actually been found guilty. The other 3 are still in pretrial. And based on what I've seen from the arrest warrants, my guess is that the following 3 will also be found guilty, but I don't think it's clear enough to where I would bet money on it. This was also a Democratic primary, so this was Democrats running against Democrats to see who would be the Democratic nominee in Bridgeport. Also, all the charges were filed against campaign workers, not election officials. So these were people that worked for specific candidates. They weren't in charge of running or overseeing any part of the election process. Okay, now let's go over the specific crimes that these people are being charged of. There were 7 total crimes, and we're going to start with the worst one, which is illegally voting more than once in the same election. Attorney Ross detailed that Castillo took possession of Graham's blank absentee ballot and signed ballot envelope for the primary. Further, that CT voter registration system shows that Castillo voted in person in the primary and that Graham voted by absentee ballot. As Castillo was the only known person to possess Graham's blank ballot and signed envelope before it was filled out and ultimately submitted, Attorney Ross concluded that Castillo executed the absentee ballot personally and therefore voted more than once in the same election. So basically, Graham was like, hey, I didn't vote, but I know that Castillo had my ballot. And then when you look back at the CT voter registration system, you see that both Graham and Castillo voted. So they concluded, okay, well, if Castillo was the only one to have really Graham's ballot, and Graham was like, I didn't vote, then Castillo probably voted for Graham and himself, which is obviously double voting. So if this is true, this is a clear example of voter fraud. It's bad, it's double voting, clearly not okay, but it's only one vote, so it's not going to be outcome determinative. And thus it would not be true to say that based on this case that the election was rigged. Next, being present when an absentee ballot applicant, aka the voter, executes an absentee ballot. Nilsa and I stood on the balcony. Nilsa told me the names to mark on the ballot. I filled the ballot out, marking the names Nilsa told me to. This is the entire reason it's illegal to be present while someone's filling out their ballot. It's because you don't want to influence them to vote a certain way, and that's exactly what happened here. So while this is an example of another thing that's really bad that should not be happening, this means there was one additional vote. It does not mean the election was rigged. Also, just to reiterate, these are all allegations of things that people are being accused of doing. It has not actually been proven that these people have actually committed these crimes, although I think they probably did. There are other instances of witnesses saying that the campaign workers were present while they were filling out their ballots, but this was the only case where a campaign worker actually influenced them to vote in any type of way. Next is illegal possession of absentee ballots. All 4 of them were charged with this crime, and the issue with this is that they could just throw out the ballot. The issue isn't that they could either change the vote or throw out their ballot and issue a new vote because of the way that the voting works. If they were to change the votes, that means circle in a new bubble. That would be 2 bubbles that are circled in, and then that would be an overvote, and that would be flagged and investigated. And then if they were to just create a new ballot and fill it out for them and act as though as them, they can't do that because each voter only gets one absentee ballot with a specific barcode marked to their identity, and so there's no way of you getting another one of those. You would have to use the one that was given to them. So worst case scenario, all 4 of those people just threw out those ballots, but there's no evidence that that happened. None of the witnesses claimed that that happened. That's just a worst case scenario. Realistically, they probably did mail in their absentee ballots. It's just they weren't allowed to do that. I guess you could argue that maybe those people wouldn't have voted otherwise, but again, going off their testimony, they probably would have. So realistically, while this was illegal, if they committed these crimes, it didn't impact the election at all. For the last 4 crimes, I'm just going to briefly go over them. I don't think it's necessary that I go into the detail. If you do want to see more detailed information on all of the crimes and everything, I have my Notion linked below, and you can check it out that way. So we got misrepresentation of eligibility requirements. Basically, the campaign workers were telling these people that they were eligible to vote absentee when they actually weren't, and that's a crime. Then we have failure to maintain an absentee ballot distribution list, which basically means anytime you distribute these papers that allow people to apply to get an absentee ballot, you have to keep a list of that, and a lot of these people did not keep that list, which is a crime. Then we have failure to sign as an assister on an absentee ballot, which basically means if you help someone with their absentee ballot application, then you have to sign as an assister, and if you don't, it's a crime. Then we have tampering with a witness, which is more so about the investigation than the election, but it basically just means that the witnesses that are giving their testimony, you're not supposed to tell them not to give information to the police, and if you do that, then that's a crime, and that's what some of these people did. So all in all, there were only really 2 situations where anything came close to rigging an election, and those only affected individual votes. So there was only 2 votes that were impacted, and that's clearly not enough to be outcome determinative in any serious way. So to me, the fact that a Democratic mayor primary has this many technical rules and this many ways for investigators to catch violations, I feel like it kind of shows how difficult it really is to rig an election, especially federally on that large of a scale. There's over 100,000 polling places across the United States, and each one has its own local staff running it. So these workers count and report their precinct's results upward, and every step is logged, observed, and cross-checked. So if someone higher up tried to change the votes, then the people below would immediately see that because the totals wouldn't match. And that same chain goes all the way up to the state level where they certify who wins and then gives that president their electoral votes. And this entire process is public. There's millions of eyes constantly watching it, ready to catch any situation where someone tries rigging the election, and that story's sensational, so obviously they're going to post it. So to me, it seems like if anything like this were to ever happen, then it would be obvious. Everyone would see it, and it would just be impossible to hide.